Warning: these Greek myths are so relaxing, they may quietly pull you into sleep before you realize what's happening. So let the day release you. Let the muscles of your face soften. Let your shoulders sink. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. These stories do not demand attention. They invite surrender. They are ancient, patient, and kind. You may follow them or you may drift while they carry you. Either way, they will remain. If you enjoy gentle stories like this, stories designed to help you rest, drift, and escape the noise of the day, then you're very welcome here at Somnicron. You can support this space simply by liking the video and subscribing. It helps more tired travelers find their way here. And before we begin, I'd love for you to leave a small footprint in the comments. Tell me the local time where you're listening right now and what the night feels like outside your window. Is it raining, quiet, cold? Warm? Now dim your lights, settle into your pillow, and imagine this. Long before there were gods with names and faces, before thunder learned how to speak and stars learned how to burn, before mountains rose or oceans stirred, there was only chaos. Not chaos as noise, not chaos as destruction, but chaos as openness. A vast, silent expanse without edge or center. No up, no down, no light, no shadow, no time, only potential. A pause so deep that even existence had not yet decided to be. Within that boundless stillness, something subtle began. It was not a sound. It was not a spark. It was more like the faint awareness of waking. From the quiet emerged Gaia, the earth. She was not yet a woman, not yet a goddess who walked or spoke. She was weight. She was steadiness. She was the promise of a place where things could remain instead of vanish, where form could hold itself, where becoming could rest. With Gaia came the idea of ground. Soon after arose Tartarus, the deep place beneath all things, a hollow wide enough to cradle worlds. Not a prison yet, not a place of punishment, but depth itself. And then, as gently as breath, came Eros. Not love as mortals would one day know it. Not romance or longing. Eros was attraction, the invisible thread that draws one existence toward another, the reason anything would ever reach. With Eros, motion entered the universe. With motion, time inhaled from chaos unfolded Nyx, the night, cloaked in velvet darkness. Beside her moved Erebus, shadow of the deep. From their quiet union emerged Ether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the day. And so the cosmos learned rhythm. Night followed day. Day followed night. Light gave way to dark. Dark gave way to light. The universe learned to breathe in cycles. The first lullaby of existence. Gaia did not remain alone. From her vast body she shaped the mountains, slow and patient, rising like ancient breaths frozen in stone. She formed Pontus, the sea, restless and wide, whose surface would one day mirror the stars and whose depths would cradle both wonder and fear. And at last she brought forth Uranus, the sky. He arched himself above her, vast and endless, a dome of blue by day and fire by night. When he stretched across her, the world gained shape. Earth below, sky above, between them space, room for wind, room for rain, room for all that would come. Gaia and Uranus became the first great pair, not bound by vows or witnesses but by necessity. Their union filled the world with life. From them came the Titans, vast and radiant beings, each carrying a piece of creation within them. Oceanus, the great encircling river. Hyperion, lord of light. Coeus, the questioning mind. Crius, keeper of constellations. Iapetus, bearer of mortal struggle. And Cronus, the youngest, quiet and watchful, listening more than he spoke. Among the daughters were Thea, whose brilliance would become sun and moon. Re, future mother of gods. Themis, law woven into being. Mnemosyne, memory itself. Phoebe, radiant and prophetic. Tethys, nourishing mother of waters. They were not gentle and they were not cruel. They were foundations given form, but Gaia's womb was not finished. She bore children who shook the world. First came the Cyclopes, bronze steropes and arges, each with a single blazing eye, smiths of storm, forgers of lightning. Their gaze burned like living flame. Then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, giants with 50 heads and 100 arms, so vast that mountains seemed small beside them. When they moved, the earth remembered. Uranus looked upon these children and felt fear. Not awe, not wonder, fear. They were too powerful, too strange, too uncontrollable. In his dread, he forced them back into Gaia's depths, burying them within her body, sealing them beneath stone and silence. The earth groaned. She felt the weight. She felt the ache. She felt the betrayal. Night after night, Uranus pressed down upon her, blind to her pain, and slowly within Gaia something hardened. Resolve. From her own flesh she shaped a blade of flint, jagged, bright, unyielding. She went to her Titan sons and spoke of her suffering. One by one they turned away, fearful of the sky's might, all except Cronus, youngest, sharp-eyed, silent. "I will," he said, when Uranus descended as he always did, spreading the sky across the earth. Cronus leapt from shadow. The strike was swift. The heavens trembled. Blood fell into the sea. From the foam rose Aphrodite, beauty born of violence, smiling as if she had never known pain. From the drops upon the earth sprang the Furies, the giants and the nymphs of ash trees. Uranus, broken, retreated into the distant sky. And as he fled, his voice carried a truth that would echo forever. "As I was overthrown by my son, so shall you be overthrown by yours." Cronus heard, and he remembered. The world exhaled. The weight upon Gaia eased, mountains lifted, seas stilled. The Titans gathered, sensing the shift in the bones of existence. Cronus, the youngest, now stood as king. At first the age that followed was gentle. The heavens no longer crushed the earth. Rivers found their paths. Stars took their places. Mortals did not yet exist. There were no prayers, no temples, no songs. Only a quiet world, newly freed. Cronus took Re as his queen, gentle where he was wary, warm where he was cold. Together they ruled what poets would one day call the Golden Age, a time without war, without hunger, without sorrow. The earth bore fruit without toil. Seasons passed without cruelty. Even time itself felt slow and kind. Yet within Cronus a shadow lived. He remembered the sky's final words. The prophecy did not shout. It whispered. It settled into him like a second heartbeat. When Re bore their first child, Hestia, warm and bright as flame, Cronus felt joy and fear in equal measure. He held her and saw himself reflected in the sky that had once ruled him. So he opened his mouth and swallowed her whole. Re screamed. Cronus told her it was necessary, that fate could not be allowed to repeat itself. She wept, but gods do not bleed, and so she endured. One by one, more children came: Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Each time Cronus took them. Each time Re watched them vanish into darkness. The Golden Age dimmed. The world remained calm, but its king was hollow. When Re felt her sixth child move within her, something within her broke. She fled across sea and stone to Crete, where caves yawned in the mountains and the earth itself could hide a secret. There, in shadow and silence, she gave birth to Zeus. The child cried and the mountains answered. Re wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and returned to Cronus. He swallowed it without looking. Below Mount Ida, Zeus was raised in secret. Nymphs sang to him. A divine goat nursed him. Warriors clashed shields to hide his cries. He grew with storms in his veins. And far above, Cronus ruled, unaware that the prophecy had already begun to breathe. The world slept, but fate did not. Zeus grew in the hidden folds of the mountain, cradled by stone and shadow, nourished by milk that tasted faintly of thunder. The nymphs who tended him spoke in hushed voices, as though the air itself might betray them. Even the wind seemed to move carefully through those caves. Warriors called the Curetes danced at the entrance. striking shield against shield so that the sound of the child's cries would be lost in the clash of bronze. Each echo became a promise. That destiny, once born, could not be silenced. The boy did not know he was hunted by prophecy. He did not know the sky above him was ruled by the Father who would one day fear him. He learned the language of stone and leaf, of goat's milk and starlight. He learned to walk on uneven ground. He learned to listen to storms long before he learned to command them. And in his dreams, Gaia whispered, not in words but in feelings, in images of chains buried in darkness, in the ache of ancient wounds. In the memory of children locked away far above, Cronus ruled. The world remained gentle. Fields bore fruit without labor. Rivers wandered without violence. Time itself seemed to rest. Yet within the king, the prophecy stirred. He felt it in quiet moments, in the pause between breaths. He felt it when Re's eyes lingered on him a moment too long. He felt it when the wind shifted without cause. The stone he had swallowed lay heavy in him, cold and mute, and though he believed himself safe, the universe had already begun to move against him. Years passed like slow tides. Zeus became a youth. His limbs grew strong. His gaze sharpened. The air around him seemed to respond when he spoke. Lightning did not yet leap from his hands, but the sky listened to him. The goats followed him. The birds lingered overhead. Even the stones beneath his feet felt awake. At last, Gaia's whispers became clearer. They carried purpose. They carried direction. Zeus learned of his true birth. He learned of the siblings lost to darkness. He learned of the father who devoured his own children to escape fate, and within him rose not rage but resolve. A quiet certainty, as steady as the mountains that had raised him. He sought Medes, wisdom embodied, whose mind could turn futures into plans. With her counsel he prepared. Strength alone would not undo a king who ruled time itself. Craft would be needed, patience, subtlety. Disguised as a humble cupbearer, Zeus entered the halls of Cronus. The golden age still glimmered there. Light drifted through endless corridors. The Titans moved with ancient calm. None recognized the storm in the eyes of the youth who poured their wine. Zeus offered his father a drink mixed with Medes' craft. It tasted of honey and sunlight. Cronus swallowed. The prophecy awakened, his body convulsed. The silence of ages broke. From him spilled the gods he had swallowed long ago. Hestia, first and gentle, Demeter, bright as harvest, Hera, proud and sharp, Hades, shadowed and steady, Poseidon, vast as the sea. They emerged not as infants but as gods fully formed, carrying the memory of darkness in their eyes. They stood together for the first time, and the world shifted. Cronus rose in fury. The Titans rallied. The sky darkened. Mountains trembled. Thus began the Titanomachy, the war between old order and new. For 10 years, heaven and earth clashed. Lightning tore the clouds. Seas rose in walls of water. Fire bled from mountains. The world learned the sound of battle. Zeus fought with storm and will. His siblings stood beside him. Yet the Titans were ancient and vast. Victory did not come easily. At last, Gaia guided Zeus once more. He descended into Tartarus and freed the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged weapons of fate, thunder for Zeus, trident for Poseidon, helm of darkness for Hades. The 100-handed ones hurled mountains as though they were stones. The tide turned. Cronus fell. The Titans were cast into the deep, bound in chains older than memory. The sky cleared. The earth healed. Zeus stood as king not by birth, but by endurance and vision, yet even as he claimed the heavens, the shadow of prophecy lingered. For power once seized must always be guarded. The cosmos remembers its cycles. And far below, in the quiet places of the world, the earth dreamed of mortals yet to come. The night grew calm again. The stars resumed their slow paths. And the universe, having learned how to break, learned once more how to rest. When the war ended and the sky finally stilled, the world lay quiet beneath a gentler light. Smoke drifted from broken mountains. Seas withdrew from shattered shores. The deep wounds of creation began slowly to close. The Titans were bound in Tartarus, their voices swallowed by the vast dark beneath the earth. The old order had fallen. The storm had passed, and in its wake stood a new king. Zeus did not take the throne in triumph. He took it in stillness. He had seen what power could become when ruled by fear. He had felt the weight of prophecy in his own bones. And so, before the world could fracture again, he turned to his brothers. Poseidon stood like a living tide, restless and vast. Hades was shadow and stone, calm and unyielding. Each had fought, each had bled, each carried the memory of darkness. The cosmos could not be held by one alone. If the cycle was to end, it must be divided. They cast lots, not in anger, not in rivalry, but in reverence for fate. To Zeus fell the sky. The wide heavens, the air between cloud and star. He became lord of thunder and rain, king of Olympus. His voice would echo in storm. His will would blaze in lightning. The eagle became his herald, soaring where no mortal breath could follow. To Poseidon fell the sea, the oceans, rivers, and hidden springs. With his trident he could calm or shatter the world's waters. Beneath the waves he built a palace of coral and gold. He ruled over creatures older than memory, over currents and depths, over all that moved in blue shadow. To Hades fell the underworld, the realm of the dead. It was not a prize many would choose, but Hades accepted it without complaint. He became guardian of souls, keeper of balance, lord of the hidden wealth beneath the earth. Though mortals would fear his name, he ruled with unwavering law. The earth itself remained shared. Mountains, forests, fields, and plains belonged to no single god. It was a place between realms where immortals might walk and mortals might one day rise. Thus the world was ordered: sky, sea, underworld, and above them all Olympus. High beyond cloud and storm, the mountain became more than stone. It became threshold, where sky met earth, where the mortal world ended and the divine began. Its halls were said to be woven of marble and light, its ceilings vaulted with starlight, its corridors wide enough for wind to wander freely. No snow touched its peaks, no storm broke its walls. It was eternal. Here Zeus gathered the gods. Hera stood beside him, queen of heaven, proud and unyielding. Demeter brought the promise of harvest. Hestia tended the eternal flame. Athena emerged in brilliance, born from wisdom and thunder. Apollo followed, radiant with light and song. Artemis walked in silver silence. Ares carried war in his stride. Hephaestus brought fire and craft. Aphrodite drifted like a smile. Hermes arrived in laughter and motion. They were not saints. They were powers. Flawed, radiant, immense, they quarreled, they loved, they betrayed. They watched the world below and shaped it with whim and wonder. And beneath their gaze, the earth waited for its next awakening. Prometheus saw that emptiness. He was a titan of foresight, a thinker among giants. Where others wielded storm and stone, he carried questions. He walked between old blood and new order, between what was and what could be. And in the quiet places of the world, he imagined something unheard of. Mankind. He shaped them from clay, some said. Others believed he breathed them into being from the dust of rivers. However it came to pass, humans rose fragile, soft of skin, slow of foot, without claw or fang or fur. They stood beneath the vast sky and shivered. Prometheus pitied them. He went to Olympus and asked that they be given a gift, something to help them survive, something to lift them above beasts. Zeus refused. Let them live, he said, but let them fear. Fire is the privilege of gods, but Prometheus did not yield. In secret he climbed to the forge of Hephaestus. He stole a spark of divine flame and hid it within a hollow reed. He carried it down from Olympus and gave it to mankind. For the first time, fire crackled beneath the stars. Light pushed back the dark. Warmth chased the cold, smoke rose like prayer. With fire came craft. With craft came memory. With memory came future. Zeus saw, and the sky darkened. To punish mankind, the gods shaped a gift. Hephaestus formed her from clay. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Hermes gave her cunning. Athena clothed her in grace. Her name was Pandora, and with her came a sealed vessel. When it was opened, sorrow poured into the world, disease, hunger, grief, toil. Only hope remained behind. Prometheus was bound to a distant mountain. Each day an eagle tore at his liver. Each night it healed. He endured, unbowed, knowing a secret Zeus feared. Below, humanity learned to live. They built fires, they told stories, they remembered, and the gods watched. The world had entered its long dream. And you are drifting within it still. The ages of mankind unfolded like slow tides, each rising and falling beneath the distant gaze of Olympus. In the earliest days, mortals lived as softly as morning mist. This was the Golden Age, remembered in later centuries as a time of harmony. The earth offered her fruits freely. No one knew hunger. No one knew war. People aged without pain and passed from life as gently as falling asleep. When they died, their spirits became quiet guardians, wandering unseen, protectors of peace and justice. It was a world that breathed in balance, untouched by sorrow. But nothing golden remains forever. When Cronus fell and Zeus rose, the Silver Age followed. These mortals were taller, stronger, and lived long lives, yet they carried less wisdom. They lingered in childhood, pampered and proud, and when at last they reached adulthood, they refused to honor the gods. They built no temples, offered no prayers, and mocked the unseen laws that shaped the world. Zeus, patient no longer, swept them away. Their spirits faded into shadow, remembered only as a warning. Then came the Bronze Age. Men were born from ash trees, their hearts as hard as the metal that named them. They loved war. Their homes were bronze. Their weapons were bronze. Their lives were measured by battle. They built no songs that endured, no cities that lasted. They destroyed one another and vanished into Hades without echo. Even the gods did not mourn them. Yet between decline and darkness, a flame flared. The heroic age. A brief, brilliant interlude when mortals rose who were greater than any before or after. They were born of gods and humans, carrying heaven in their blood and earth in their bones. This was the age of Perseus and Heracles, of Theseus and Atalanta, of Jason and his wandering Argonauts. They fought monsters, crossed seas, and carved their names into memory. They built cities and toppled tyrants. Some were granted rest in the Isles of the Blessed, far beyond the western edge of the world, where heroes walked in eternal sunlight. And then, at last, came the Iron Age, the age of toil, the age of sorrow, the age in which you still live. Here, mortals labor from dawn to dusk. They plant in stubborn soil. They raise children in a world shaped by hunger and war. Bonds fracture between friend and friend, between kin and kin. Justice walks with her eyes lowered. Oaths grow thin. The gods grow distant. Towers rise. Forests fall. Gold becomes king. Yet even in this age, hope endures. It flickers in hearth fires. It lives in stories. It survives in the quiet dream that the world was once kinder, and perhaps that is why myths remain. They are not only tales of gods and monsters. They are memories of what the world has been and whispers of what it might be again. Beneath Olympus, beneath storm and star, humanity learned to speak these stories in the dark, around fires, in fields, on ships crossing uncertain seas. Each retelling softened the edges of fear. Each name became a lantern against the night. The gods still watched, Zeus from the sky, Poseidon from the deep, Hades from the silent halls below. They shaped fate with storms and omens, but it was mortals who filled the earth with meaning. Their lives were brief beside eternity, yet in those brief moments they loved, built, dreamed, and dared. And so the world continued, a vast, breathing story, a dream that began in chaos and unfolded through light and shadow, a dream you are now drifting through. Let it carry you. The gods will speak again. Fear has always been the shadow that walks beside prophecy. In the city of Argos, a king named Acrisius sat upon his throne and listened to words he could not escape. The oracle had spoken plainly. His daughter would bear a son. That son would one day end his life. The king, who ruled men and walls and laws, found himself powerless before a future that had already been written. So he acted as mortals often do when faced with destiny. He tried to cage it. His daughter, Danae, was sealed away in a chamber of bronze, deep beneath the earth. No man would reach her. No child would be born. The prophecy would starve in darkness. But fate does not respect walls. Zeus saw the girl hidden beneath stone. He saw her loneliness. He saw the thread of destiny glowing within her. And as he had done so many times before, he stepped beyond the limits of mortal design. He did not come in thunder or flame. He came as golden rain, slipping through the smallest cracks in the ceiling, falling softly into the chamber where Danae waited. From that quiet miracle, Perseus was conceived. When Acrisius discovered the child, fear consumed him. He dared not kill them outright, for even kings tremble before the gods. Instead, he placed mother and infant in a wooden chest and cast them into the sea, trusting the waves to do what his hands would not. But the sea has its own will. The chest drifted across dark waters, carried by tides older than fear, until it reached the shores of Seriphos. There, a humble fisherman named Dictys found them. He opened the chest and saw not doom but life. He took them in. He raised the boy as his own. Perseus grew beneath open skies. He learned to cast nets, to walk the shore, to read wind and cloud. He did not know he was born of gods. He only knew that the world felt wide and that something within him leaned toward it. But even quiet lives draw the eye of fate. The king of Seriphos, Polydex, desired Danae. Perseus stood between them. The king, unable to strike openly, turned to cunning. He announced a false wedding and demanded gifts from every man. Perseus, poor but proud, boasted that he would bring a gift greater than any horse or jewel, the head of Medusa. It was meant as a death sentence. Medusa was mortal among the Gorgons, yet no less deadly. Her gaze turned flesh to stone. No man who sought her had returned. Polydex smiled and waited for the boy to vanish. But Olympus had been watching. Athena lent Perseus a shield polished like a mirror. Hermes gave him winged sandals and a curved blade. They guided him to ancient beings who knew hidden paths, to nymphs who guarded sacred tools. Step by step, the mortal child of gods was armed not only with weapons, but with fate itself. At the edge of the world, where night clung to stone, Perseus found the Gorgons sleeping. He did not look at Medusa directly. He watched her reflection, and with one clean strike he ended her life. From her blood sprang Pegasus, winged and wild, and Chrysaor, born in brilliance. Perseus fled, unseen beneath Hades' helm, carrying the head that still held its power. On his return, he saved Andromeda from a sea-born monster. He turned kings to stone. He returned home not as a boy, but as legend. Yet prophecy is patient. At a festival, throwing a discus, Perseus struck an old man in the crowd. Acrisius, his grandfather. The king who had tried to outrun fate died without knowing that destiny had caught him through accident, not malice. Thus the circle closed. Perseus lived on, ruling, founding cities, fathering kings. From his bloodline would come another hero, greater in strength and sorrow than any before. Heracles. And through him, The world would learn that even divine power cannot shield a heart from grief. The age of heroes had begun, and the night, as always, was listening. Heracles was born beneath a sky heavy with storm. His mother, Alcmene, was mortal. His father, Zeus, wore the face of her husband for a single, endless night. When the truth reached Olympus, Hera's silence hardened into wrath. She had endured betrayal before. She would endure it again. But this child would not grow unmarked. Even in the cradle, Heracles carried power. His breath seemed too strong for such a small chest. His fingers curled with instinctive force. Hera sent 2 serpents to end him before he could speak his first word. They slid into the nursery in the hush before dawn, their coils whispering across the stone. The infant reached out. He closed one hand around each serpent's throat. By the time the nurses arrived, the danger lay limp upon the floor, and the child laughed. From that moment, the world watched him. He grew swift and immense. Tutors taught him music, letters, the bow, the spear. But his strength was always one breath ahead of his restraint. There was a wildness in him that no lesson could tame. He married Megara and for a time lived in peace, guarding Thebes, fathering sons, building a life that resembled happiness. Hera waited. Madness came like a fog. One evening, in a moment stolen from reason, Heracles saw enemies where there were none. He struck. When the veil lifted, his home lay broken. His children lay silent. His wife lay cold. The hero knelt in ash. No monster had done this. No enemy had struck, only him. Grief hollowed him. He wandered until the oracle of Delphi spoke. To atone, he must serve King Eurystheus, a lesser man by strength, yet greater by fate. 12 labors would be set before him. Through them, redemption might be earned. So began the long road. He strangled the Nemean lion whose hide no blade could pierce and wore its skin as armor. He burned the heads of the Hydra and dipped his arrows in its venom. He captured the golden hind of Artemis without harm. He wrestled the boar of Arcadia in snow and laughter. He cleansed stables with rivers. He drove away birds of bronze. He tamed bulls and mares and giants. He stole apples guarded by death. He descended into the underworld and returned with Cerberus itself. Each labor stripped him. Each labor rebuilt him. But no victory erased the memory. At last, poisoned by a gift meant as love, Heracles felt death climb through his bones. He built his own pyre and stepped into flames. Zeus lifted him from ash and set him among the gods. He became immortal. Yet even on Olympus, his eyes carried earth. Heracles showed mortals that strength does not free one from sorrow. Only endurance gives meaning. Another hero rose whose greatness lay not in muscle, but in mind. Theseus, born of king and sea god, raised far from his throne, he lifted a stone to claim his fate. He chose the dangerous road to Athens, clearing it of monsters and tyrants. He entered the labyrinth. He slew the Minotaur. He followed a thread back into light. He built a city from scattered villages. He gave Athens its bones, yet he forgot to change the sails. His father leapt into the sea. The hero became king in grief. Even the clever fall. And far across the waters another story gathered. Jason, heir without a throne, returned wearing one sandal. An oracle whispered of danger. A king sent him for the golden fleece. Jason gathered heroes. They sailed the Argo. They crossed clashing rocks. They met kings and monsters and storms. In Colchis he met Medea. She gave him magic. She gave him escape. She gave him everything. He took the fleece. He left her. She answered with fire. Jason died beneath the ribs of his own ship, struck by a falling beam, forgotten by the world he had crossed. Heroes rose. Heroes fell. Their stories became lanterns in the dark. Above them, Olympus watched. Below, humanity remembered. And somewhere, far beyond the edges of maps, a war was waiting. A war born of beauty. A war born of choice. A war that would burn cities and echo forever. The night deepened. And the story drifted on, long before that war would ignite, long before ships gathered and spears were raised, the gods themselves planted its seed. It began, as so many great disasters do, not with hatred but with celebration. On a bright day filled with music and nectar, Peleus, a mortal king, married Thetis, a sea nymph of ancient power. The gods were invited. The halls of Olympus glittered. Laughter drifted like perfume through the air. Only one goddess was not welcomed, Eris, spirit of discord, whose presence soured even the sweetest feast. She did not arrive in rage. She arrived in silence. Across the marble floor she rolled a single golden apple. Upon it were carved 3 quiet words to the fairest. Hera saw it and claimed it. Athena stepped forward, her eyes clear and unyielding. Aphrodite smiled. The apple became a question no god could answer. Zeus would not judge. He had learned the cost of choosing between powers. Instead, he sent the goddesses to a mortal shepherd on Mount Ida, a youth named Paris, son of Troy's king, raised among flocks after an omen foretold he would one day bring ruin upon his city. The goddesses appeared before him in radiance. Hera offered dominion over all men. Athena promised wisdom and victory in war. Aphrodite whispered of love, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose. And in that choice the world tilted. Helen of Sparta, daughter of Zeus, wife of King Menelaus, became the prize of a promise. Whether she followed Paris willingly or was taken remains a matter of song. But when Paris sailed from Sparta with Helen beside him, an oath was awakened. All who had once sought her hand had sworn to defend her marriage. Menelaus called. Kings answered. Agamemnon of Mycenae, Odysseus of Ithaca, Ajax the towering, Diomedes the fierce, Nestor the wise, even Achilles, hidden by his mother to escape fate, was drawn from concealment. 1,000 ships gathered, sails darkened the horizon, but the winds did not move. Artemis demanded blood for a slight. Agamemnon offered his daughter. The sea opened its path. The war began before a single spear struck. Across the wine-dark sea they sailed toward Troy, toward 10 years of fire, toward heroes who would become ghosts, toward a city whose walls would hear songs of grief long after they fell. And above it all, the gods watched. Some favored Troy, some favored Greece. Some played both sides. Mortals would fight. Gods would argue, and fate would move quietly through them all. The night stretched wide, and the world prepared to burn. The ships cut across the dark water like silent blades, their sails swollen with destiny. Beneath them, the sea murmured in ancient rhythms, carrying warriors who believed themselves masters of their fate. Above them, clouds drifted in slow indifference. The world had seen wars before. It would see wars again, but this one would be remembered. Troy rose from the plain like a dream of stone. Its walls were said to be shaped by gods. Its towers caught the sun. Its gates bore the weight of centuries. Within them lived kings and children, poets and shepherds, women who wove and men who prayed. They did not yet know that their names would become ashes in the mouths of future generations. When the Greeks arrived, the earth itself seemed to pause. The first spear was thrown not by a king, but by chance. Protesilaus leapt ashore and fell. His blood marked the sand. Thus 10 years of waiting began, and thunder. Camps were built, fires burned, songs rose and faded. Men aged, boys became soldiers. The sea carried the dead home in silence. Achilles moved like living flame. His rage was a storm. His hands ended lives as easily as breath. Yet even he could not escape sorrow. When Patroclus fell in borrowed armor, the hero wept like a child. His grief became wrath. Hector, defender of Troy, met him beneath the walls. Their duel echoed through time. Hector fell. Troy shuddered. Priam, old king, crossed the battlefield at night. He knelt before the man who had slain his son. Even Achilles could not withstand that humility. He returned the body. For a moment, war remembered mercy. The gods intervened in whispers and winds. Apollo guided arrows. Athena twisted fate. Aphrodite shielded Paris. Zeus weighed destinies in golden scales. Mortals believed they fought one another. In truth, they moved within a web far larger than themselves. Years passed, walls stood. Men grew weary, cunning ended what strength could not. A horse of wood stood at Troy's gate. Night fell, songs faded. The city burned, and when dawn came, only smoke answered the sun. From Troy's ashes rose new wanderings. Odysseus would drift for 10 years more. Aeneas would carry fire across seas to build a future Rome. The world did not end, it shifted. Every ending became a beginning. The gods returned to Olympus. Mortals returned to fields and ruins. The earth healed where it could. Stories filled the places where cities had stood. The age of heroes waned. The gods remained. Yet something had changed. Mortals had seen how fragile even legends could be. They began to look inward. They asked not only who ruled the sky, but who ruled themselves. In quiet valleys, philosophers spoke. In crowded streets, poets sang. Temples rose beside markets. The divine did not vanish, but it grew distant like stars at dawn. The world learned to walk on its own. But deep beneath that growing independence, the myths continued to breathe. They slept in stone. They drifted in song. They waited in memory. And even now, as your breathing slows, as the weight of the day eases, those ancient voices still move. They do not demand belief. They offer belonging. They remind the night that it is not empty. They remind you that even in silence, a story is unfolding. And somewhere, beyond the edge of thought, the gods are still listening. In the centuries that followed, the world of mortals stretched outward, as if waking from a long, storm-filled dream. Cities rose where forests once whispered. Roads stitched valleys together. Ships no longer sailed only in search of monsters or prophecy, but for trade, for curiosity, for the quiet promise of what lay beyond the horizon. The age of heroes faded into memory, yet their shadows lingered in every tale told beside a hearth. The gods still ruled, but they were no longer the only voice in the world. Men began to shape laws instead of destinies. They built councils where once they had built altars. They argued not only about what the gods desired, but about what justice itself might mean. In Athens, words became weapons sharper than spears. In Sparta, discipline hardened into identity. In distant lands, kingdoms rose and fell without ever hearing a whisper from Olympus. The divine did not vanish. It softened. Storms still spoke in Zeus's voice. The sea still carried Poseidon's moods. Death still bore the quiet hand of Hades. But mortals began to live as though the world belonged in part to them. And the gods, who had once walked openly among humankind, grew more distant. Some say they withdrew out of pride. Others say it was necessity. For as mortals learned to reason, to question, to remember, belief itself changed shape. A god cannot rule the same world forever. Even immortality must adapt. Yet myths endured. They became bridges between what was seen and what was felt. They carried fear and wonder. They explained thunder to children. They turned grief into meaning. They taught that suffering was not solitary, that even gods had known loss. A mother who lost a child whispered Demeter's name. A sailor facing storm thought of Poseidon. A warrior in battle wondered whether Athena watched. A dying man hoped Hades would be just. The stories did not fade, they transformed. They became quiet companions in human thought, symbols, echoes, dreams that outlived their own gods. And so the world moved forward, carrying ancient voices in its bones. Empires would rise, empires would fall, new gods would be named, old ones would sleep. But the night would always remember, even now in this stillness those myths breathe. They flow through you like slow water. They settle behind your eyes like distant stars. They remind you that every ending is only another turning. Long ago, chaos became story and story became you. Let it carry you. Let the world grow soft. The gods are quiet now, but the dream continues. Even as cities learned to govern themselves and mortals began to trust their own hands, the old powers never truly departed. They simply changed the way they touched the world. No longer did gods stride openly through marketplaces or sit beside shepherds at dusk. Instead, they became currents beneath events, subtle pressures in the shape of chance, memory, and longing. A sudden wind in a sail, a dream that lingered upon waking, a feeling that a choice mattered more than it seemed. The divine withdrew not into absence, but into atmosphere. Zeus still ruled the sky, yet storms now arrived without prophecy. Thunder no longer carried direct commands. It became wonder. It became warning. It became metaphor. Poseidon still stirred the seas, but sailors now read the waves with skill rather than prayer alone. Hades remained beneath the earth, though death itself began to feel less like a god's decree and more like a quiet certainty woven into life. The world was growing inward. Mortals began to tell the stories not only to explain the world, but to understand themselves. Heracles no longer lived merely as a hero who crushed monsters. He became the symbol of endurance. Theseus no longer stood only as slayer of beasts, but as builder of order. Perseus was no longer just a boy who beheaded a Gorgon, but a reminder that fate may bend through courage and chance. The myths softened into mirrors. Each generation retold them differently. A mother told them to her child as comfort, a poet shaped them into song, a philosopher searched them for hidden patterns. The same stories breathed through countless minds, changing tone with every telling, yet never losing their core. They were not frozen, they were alive. And in that living, the gods themselves changed. Aphrodite became more than beauty. She became longing itself. Athena became more than a goddess of war. She became thought, strategy, wisdom. Hermes became motion, connection, boundary crossing. Even Zeus transformed from thunderer to symbol of authority, law, and the fragile balance of power. The divine was no longer only above, it was within. In this way, the gods achieved a different kind of immortality. Even if temples crumbled, even if names were forgotten, the shapes they cast upon human thought endured. Storm, sea, death, love, memory, order, chaos. These were not destroyed by disbelief. They simply changed languages. The world grew quieter, not empty, quieter. And yet in that quiet something ancient stirred, for myths do not vanish when ignored. They wait. They sleep beneath language, they hide in dreams, they linger in the patterns of fear and hope. A child staring at the night sky feels Zeus without knowing his name. A traveler standing before the ocean feels Poseidon without offering wine. A mourner beside a grave feels Hades without speaking a prayer. The gods are no longer rulers, they are echoes, and echoes never truly fade. Time moves forward. Empires rise and collapse, new stories replace old ones. Yet beneath every tale of heroes, beneath every story of loss and return, the same ancient rhythm persists. Chaos, birth, struggle, change, rest, renewal. It is the rhythm of the universe learning itself. And now, as your breathing slows, as thought loosens its grip, you are part of that rhythm. You are a listener in the long chain of listeners. A bearer of memory, even if you do not remember every word. The myths do not require your attention, they only require your presence. They flow through you like night air through an open window. They settle like dust of stars upon the mind. They remind you that even in stillness, something ancient is moving. The gods no longer shout, they whisper. And in that whisper, the world continues. The whisper of the old world did not vanish when belief softened. It simply learned new paths. Where once a god would descend in thunder, now a story would rise in a child's mind. Where once an oracle spoke in smoke and stone, now a question would form in the quiet of a human heart. The myths adapted as all living things do. They did not demand temples. They required only attention, a pause, a moment in which someone wondered why storms felt alive, or why love could wound as deeply as any blade. In every culture that followed, echoes of Olympus appeared. New names were given. New faces were shaped, but the patterns remained. Sky fathers ruled above. Sea spirits whispered in waves. Underworlds waited beneath soil. Tricksters danced between worlds. Warrior goddesses guarded cities. Mothers of harvest mourned and returned. Humanity did not abandon the gods. It translated them. Even those who denied the old myths carried them unconsciously. They spoke of fate. They spoke of trials. They spoke of heroes who fell and rose. They spoke of darkness that must be crossed and light that must be earned. These were not inventions. They were inheritances. The ancient stories had become the architecture of thought. And so the world continued to change, but never to forget. A farmer in a distant age still felt Demeter when rain came after drought. A traveler still felt Hermes in the rhythm of roads. A soldier still felt Ares in the trembling before battle. A poet still felt Apollo in the sudden bloom of song. The gods were no longer seen, they were felt. Time folded over itself. Generations passed like waves. Empires wrote their names in stone, then watched them weather. Languages shifted. Borders dissolved. Stars remained. And always, beneath the surface of progress, the old rhythm endured. Chaos becoming form. Form breaking into change. Change returning to stillness. This is the rhythm you have always known. It is in your breathing. It is in your heartbeat. It is in the way sleep comes after waking. Long ago, the universe learned how to dream. Chaos became story. Story became memory. Memory became meaning. Meaning became you. And now, as your body grows heavy and your thoughts soften, you are returning to that first dream. The one that began before gods, before earth, before sky. You are drifting back toward the quiet that holds everything. The myths do not need you to stay awake. They do not need you to follow every name. They only ask that you rest inside them. Somewhere beyond thought, Gaia still breathes. Somewhere beyond sight, Nyx still spreads her veil. Somewhere beyond fear, Eros still draws all things together. The world continues. The story continues. And you are safe within it. Let the night hold you. Let the ancient dream carry you onward. From the embers of heroes and the quiet withdrawal of gods, a different kind of age began to form, one not shaped by prophecy alone, but by choice. Mortals no longer waited for thunder to tell them what to do. They built. They argued. They dreamed in ways the gods themselves had never imagined. And yet, beneath every invention and every law, the old stories pulsed like a second heart. The world had learned to stand. But standing did not mean forgetting. In every village, in every city, in every lonely stretch of road, people continued to tell stories. They spoke of Perseus in hushed admiration. They spoke of Heracles when strength was needed. They spoke of Theseus when justice felt fragile. They spoke of Troy when pride led to ruin. The myths became a map, not of the land, but of the soul. A child listening by firelight did not hear history. They heard possibility. They heard that monsters could be faced, that fate could be challenged, that even gods could fall, that suffering could be endured. And in that hearing, something ancient awakened, for the age of heroes had not truly ended, it had changed its shape. Where once heroes were born of gods and mortals, now they were born of fear and resolve. Where once they wielded swords blessed by Olympus, now they wielded words, tools, ideas. Yet the inner journey remained the same. Every life became a quest. Every heart carried a labyrinth. Every fear became a beast waiting in shadow. The world learned to mirror myth. A farmer facing winter became Perseus before Medusa. A mother protecting her child became Demeter searching for Persephone. A traveler leaving home became Odysseus, uncertain of return. The gods no longer descended, but their stories walked in human skin. And sometimes, in moments of deep stillness, the boundary between past and present thinned. A mountain ridge at dawn felt like Olympus. A dark forest felt like Artemis' realm. A restless sea whispered Poseidon's name. Even those who claimed disbelief felt these echoes, because myth is not belief. It is memory written into reality in distant lands. Philosophers spoke of reason and order. In crowded cities, merchants measured time by coin and season. Empires formed and fractured. Yet beneath every structure lay the same fragile truth. Humans still searched for meaning in a vast, indifferent universe, and meaning is born from story. The Greeks had given the world gods who were not perfect, gods who loved too fiercely, who envied, who erred, who learned. In doing so, they had given humanity permission to be flawed without being broken. Zeus himself had known fear. Hera had known betrayal. Demeter had known loss. Even immortals carried wounds. What then of mortals? To live was not to fail. To suffer was not to be abandoned. The myths whispered this truth in every retelling. When storms broke ships, sailors remembered that even Odysseus had drifted. When cities fell, elders recalled that Troy once burned. When love ended, poets invoked Aphrodite's cruel smile. The world did not become kinder, but it became understandable. And understanding is a form of shelter. As centuries passed, temples rose and crumbled. New gods arrived. Old names softened into legend, yet the architecture of myth remained. Every tale of a chosen one, every journey into darkness, every return into light. These were not inventions. They were reflections of a pattern older than language: chaos, creation, struggle, transformation, rest. The same rhythm that had birthed Gaia still moved in every human life. You were born, you struggled, you changed, you rested. The universe repeated itself in you. And so, even now, as your body grows heavy and your breathing deepens, you are part of that pattern. You are not outside the story, you are within it. A chapter written in quiet heartbeats and drifting thoughts. The heroes have not vanished, they have become subtle. They appear when you face what frightens you. They appear when you choose to endure. They appear when you walk forward despite uncertainty. You do not need a sword. You carry the same courage in softer form. The night knows this. It has watched countless lives rise and fall. It has held kings and shepherds alike. It has wrapped heroes and strangers in the same dark cloth, and in that darkness, all stories become equal. All journeys return to rest. The gods once ruled the sky. Now the sky watches you, quiet, endless, patient, and the ancient dream continues. The night has always been the great equalizer. Beneath it, crowns lose their shine, cities become silhouettes, and even mountains soften into shadow. It is in the night that the old stories feel closest, not because they demand belief, but because they speak the same language as darkness, slow, vast, and patient. Long before mortals named the stars, they lay beneath them and wondered. Long before they carved laws into stone, they listened to wind in trees and imagined voices within it. The myths were not born from imagination alone. They rose from this shared stillness, from the human need to give shape to the unknown. In every age, people have stood at the edge of something larger than themselves. A storm on the horizon, a child's first breath, the quiet after loss. These moments feel too wide for ordinary words. Myth steps in where language falters. It does not explain the world in facts. It explains it in feeling. It says, "You are not alone in this vastness. Others have stood here before you. Even gods have trembled." The Greeks understood this instinctively. They did not craft gods who were distant and perfect. They shaped gods who erred, who desired, who suffered. Their divinities were mirrors, not ideals. Zeus ruled, yet feared. Hera loved, yet wounded. Athena reasoned, yet burned with pride. Demeter nurtured, yet mourned. In every divine flaw, mortals recognized themselves. This was the quiet revolution of Greek myth. It told humanity that imperfection did not disqualify one from meaning. To struggle was not to fail. To fall was not to be erased. To change was not to betray one's nature. Even the gods changed. Even the world itself had once been chaos. As the centuries deepened, this understanding seeped into art, into philosophy, into the way people imagined their own lives. Tragedies were written not to frighten, but to release. Audiences wept for Oedipus, for Antigone, for heroes undone by forces both within and beyond themselves. In their sorrow, people found relief. If even kings and demigods could be broken, then suffering was not a personal curse. It was part of the human shape. Myth became medicine. It gave sorrow a face. It gave fear a story. It gave endurance a lineage. Every culture that followed carried this gift, whether they knew its source or not. New gods emerged. New heavens were named. But the structure remained. A beginning from darkness. A rise into form. A fall into conflict. A return through transformation. It is the pattern of life itself. It is the rhythm of breath. Inhale, hold. Exhale, rest. You have lived this pattern more times than you can remember. Every day begins in a kind of chaos, the unshaped space of mourning. You rise. You become. You struggle through motion and demand. You return to stillness. Sleep carries you back to the dark from which the next day will form. The myths simply noticed this first. They wrapped it in gods and monsters so the mind could hold it. And now, as your awareness softens, you are stepping back into that original rhythm. The one that existed before names. Before walls. Before fear learned to speak. You are returning gently to the same quiet from which Gaia once emerged. The same quiet Nyx still spreads across the sky. The same quiet that has held every hero after their final breath. This is not emptiness. It is potential. It is rest. It is the place where stories sleep until they are needed again. Somewhere in that quiet, Perseus still lifts his shield. Heracles still carries his burden. Odysseus still scans the horizon. They are not waiting to be believed. They are waiting to be felt. They live wherever someone chooses to face what frightens them. Wherever someone keeps walking when they would rather stop. Wherever someone hopes in the dark. And tonight, you do not need to be heroic. You only need to rest. Let the myths breathe for you. Let the ancient rhythm carry your thoughts. Let the universe remember you into sleep. The night has done this before. It knows exactly how. The myths were never meant to end. They were never meant to be sealed inside books or carved only into stone. They were designed to move, to drift, to change shape as the world itself changed. Every generation became a quiet author, reshaping the ancient patterns to fit new skies and unfamiliar fears. What remained constant was not the names of gods, nor the exact sequence of events, but the emotional architecture beneath them. The feeling that life is larger than any single moment, and that meaning can be found even in uncertainty. In this way, Greek mythology did not vanish when its temples fell. It dissolved into the bloodstream of culture. It became metaphor. It became structure. It became the unseen skeleton of countless stories that followed. Every tale of a chosen one, every journey through darkness, every descent into despair followed by return, these are not modern inventions. They are echoes of Persephone's path, of Orpheus in the underworld, of Odysseus on endless seas. Even when the names are forgotten, the shape remains. The world learned to speak in myths without realizing it was doing so. A child reading of distant galaxies feels the same wonder once felt beneath Olympus. A traveler standing at the edge of an ocean feels the same humility sailors once offered to Poseidon. A person facing loss feels the same hollow ache that Demeter felt when Persephone vanished. The gods have become feelings. They live in awe, they live in grief, they live in courage, they live in longing. And because these feelings never leave the human heart, the gods never truly die. Time continues to stretch forward, but it does not erase what lies beneath it. It only layers over it. Beneath every city is older ground. Beneath every idea is an older question. Beneath every story is a more ancient one. Chaos still waits behind form. Silence still waits behind sound. Sleep still waits behind every waking thought. The universe has always known how to rest. Long before stars burned, it rested. Long before earth formed, it rested. Long before gods were named, it rested. And after every age, it returns to rest again. You are part of that rhythm. Your body already understands it. Your breathing follows it. Your heartbeat marks it. Your mind, which has carried the weight of a day, begins to loosen because it recognizes what is coming. Sleep is not an end. It is a return. A soft echo of the first quiet from which all stories were born. The myths were born in that quiet. They rose from it like dreams given shape. They moved through it like constellations across night. They returned to it when voices faded. And now, you are drifting back toward the same place. There is nothing you must solve here, nothing you must remember, nothing you must become. You do not need to be a hero. You do not need to be wise. You do not need to be strong. You only need to be. The night does the rest. Somewhere, Gaia still holds the world. Somewhere, Nyx still spreads her veil. Somewhere, Eros still draws all things together. And here now, you are safe within that ancient pattern. Let thought soften. Let memory loosen. Let the world grow distant. The story continues without effort. The universe remembers how to carry you. Sleep is simply its gentlest chapter. The quiet that follows a long story is not emptiness. It is the place where the story becomes part of you. Long after the last word fades, something remains, drifting beneath thought, settling into memory like soft ash after a distant fire. This is how myths survive. They do not cling to the mind by force. They sink gently, becoming atmosphere, becoming mood, becoming a way the world feels rather than something it merely explains. You have been carried across beginnings and endings, across gods and heroes, across fire and sea. You have moved from chaos into form, from storm into stillness. And now, like every traveler before you, you arrive at the same quiet harbor where all stories rest. This harbor has no walls. It has no gates. It asks nothing of you. It is the place where thought loosens its grip. Long before there were names, this quiet existed. Long before the first myth was whispered beside a fire, this stillness held the world. Even the gods emerged from it. Even chaos itself was only a pause before becoming. Everything that lives moves away from this silence, and everything that lives returns to it. You return each night. Not as an ending, as a renewal. The body knows this truth even when the mind resists. Muscles soften, breath deepens. The weight of the day releases its hold. The world does not vanish, it simply waits. Tomorrow will come, but now belongs to the dark. The ancients believed night was a goddess not because darkness was feared, but because it was powerful. Night could quiet even the sun. Night could calm even the sea. Night could hold sorrow without judgment. Night could restore what daylight exhausted. Nyx was not an enemy, she was shelter. In her presence, even gods rested. And now, in this modern stillness, her veil remains. It covers cities and forests alike. It falls on oceans and deserts. It touches every roof, every road, every room. It touches you. Beneath it, the world becomes equal again, the powerful and the small, the remembered and the forgotten, the ancient and the new. All are held. This is why stories meant for sleep have always existed. They do not seek to instruct. They seek to accompany. They walk beside you as thought slows, as awareness thins, as the border between waking and dreaming softens. They remind you that the mind does not need to be sharp to be safe, that vigilance can rest, that nothing is demanded in this hour. The myths once guided people through storms and wars. Now they guide you through night. They do not ask you to believe in Zeus or Hera or Athena. They ask only that you feel the ancient rhythm beneath your own breathing, the rhythm of becoming and resting, of rising and returning, of form emerging from quiet and dissolving back into it. You are not stepping into emptiness. You are stepping into origin. The same origin that held the first spark of light, the same origin that shaped earth and sky, the same origin that dreamed gods into being. It dreams you now. There is nothing you must carry forward, nothing you must finish, nothing you must prove. The world will continue without effort. Storms will form, stars will move, morning will arrive when it is ready. For now you are allowed to fade. Let the edges of thought blur, let images loosen. Let memory become mist. The ancient story does not end, it simply becomes quiet. And in that quiet, you drift, back toward the place where all stories begin. The world never truly leaves its myths behind. It carries them the way the body carries memory, not always consciously, not always in words, but in posture, in instinct, in the quiet ways people respond to wonder and fear. Even in ages that believe themselves far removed from gods and monsters, the ancient patterns persist. A child still looks up at lightning and feels something larger than explanation. A traveler still stands before the sea and senses a will beneath the waves. A mourner still feels that death is more than absence. These reactions are older than language. They are myths remembering itself. Every civilization that rises believes it stands at the center of time. Every generation feels new, unbound by what came before. Yet beneath that feeling lies continuity. The same questions return, clothed in different voices. Where did we come from? Why do we suffer? What endures? What waits beyond this breath? Greek mythology did not answer these questions with certainty. It answered them with story. It offered a universe that felt alive, personal, responsive. A universe in which even chaos could become cradle. And that is why the myths endure. They do not say, "This is how the world is." They say, "This is how the world feels." They understand that humans live not only in reality but in meaning. We do not move through days as clocks do. We move through them as storytellers. We remember not hours but moments. We carry not dates but feelings. A single glance, a single loss, a single triumph can outweigh years. Myth speaks in this same language. It arranges time by emotion rather than measure. It teaches that a journey matters more than distance, that a trial matters more than outcome, that a fall matters more than height. In the myths, even the gods must learn. Zeus learns restraint. Demeter learns endurance. Hades learns guardianship. Persephone learns return. No power is static. No form is final. Even immortality bends. This is perhaps the most comforting truth hidden in ancient tales. Nothing is fixed forever. Not pain, not fear, not even the heavens. The universe itself began in formless quiet and shaped itself into stars. If even existence can change, then no state of being is absolute. Suffering is not permanent. Joy is not permanent. Night is not permanent. Day is not permanent. Everything moves. And movement is mercy. The Greeks imagined a world where cycles governed all things. Seasons turned. Generations passed. Gods rose and fell. Heroes burned brightly and vanished. Nothing stayed exactly as it was. This was not tragedy. It was balance. The rhythm of breathing written into the cosmos. Modern life often forgets this rhythm. It rushes. It insists. It demands permanence in a world that cannot grant it. It teaches the mind to cling. Myth teaches the mind to flow. It reminds you that even the most powerful sky once yielded to change, that even the deepest underworld opens and closes, that even the darkest night contains a promise of dawn. As you rest, this lesson returns in its simplest form. You do not need to hold the day. You do not need to solve tomorrow. You do not need to be alert. Like Persephone descending, you may release. Like Demeter waiting, the world will endure. Like the earth in winter, you may sleep. Rest is not weakness. It is alignment with the oldest law, the law that shaped stars and seas, the law that turns seasons, the law that quiets thought and softens breath. In sleep, you are not leaving life, you are participating in its most ancient rhythm. The myths do not end here. They curl around you like wind through leaves. They move beneath you like deep water. They hover above you like distant constellations. They ask nothing. They offer only this. You belong to something vast. You are carried by patterns older than fear. You are allowed to let go. And as your awareness thins, as the edges of thought dissolve, the ancient world grows nearer, not in form, not in name, but in feeling. The same feeling that once gave birth to gods now gives birth to dreams. The universe remembers how to hold you. It has been doing so since before there were stars. The act of letting go is one the world practices constantly. Leaves loosen from branches. Waves release the shore. Stars burn themselves into darkness. Nothing in existence clings forever, and nothing is lost without becoming something else. Even myths, which seem eternal, change form as they pass from mouth to mouth, from mind to mind. They do not resist time. They ride it. In the ancient world, sleep itself was a god. Hypnos drifted across battlefields and bedrooms alike, closing the eyes of warriors and kings with the same gentle touch. He was not feared. He was welcomed. His brother, Thanatos, followed quietly, carrying souls when their journeys were complete. The two were not enemies of life. They were its companions. Rest and release, pause and passage. Even the Greeks, who filled the cosmos with thunder and flame, understood that surrender was sacred. They knew that no being, mortal or divine, could remain awake forever. Zeus himself slept. Hera dreamed. Even the Titans once lay in silence beneath the earth. Sleep was not escape, it was balance. And so, each night, humanity reenacts the oldest story. The mind loosens its grip. The body releases its armor. The self dissolves slightly, returning to the larger rhythm from which it arose. In that return, there is safety. In that return, there is renewal. You do this every day, not because you are weak, because you are alive. The world does not require constant vigilance. It breathes whether you watch it or not. The sun will rise. The tides will turn. The future will unfold in ways no waking thought can command. The myths have always known this. They show gods who scheme and mortals who strive. Yet fate still moves in its own quiet arc. Control is an illusion. Participation is enough. This is why stories meant for sleep feel different from those meant for daylight. They do not push forward. They do not demand resolution. They drift. They circle. They echo. They resemble the way the mind itself behaves when it begins to rest. Thoughts stretch. Images blur. Time softens. Meaning becomes atmosphere rather than structure. You are not losing awareness. You are widening it. In sleep, the boundaries of the self grow porous. Memory mingles with imagination. Past meets future. The brain returns to a more ancient mode of knowing, one that existed long before language. In that state, myth feels natural. It feels like home. Not because you believe it literally, but because it speaks in the same symbolic rhythm as dreams. Dreams are myths your mind tells itself. They are stories without grammar, journeys without maps, meanings without explanation. And yet, they feel true. The Greeks understood this kinship. They believed dreams came from the gods, carried on wings of shadow. They built shrines to Hypnos beside rivers and caves. They sought guidance in sleep. They trusted the night to reveal what the day concealed. Modern life teaches you to distrust this softness. It tells you to stay sharp, to stay alert, to stay defined. It praises tension. It rewards constant readiness. But the body remembers older laws. It remembers that life is not sustained by strain alone. It is sustained by rhythm, action and rest, sound and silence, light and dark. You cannot inhale forever, you must exhale. And this moment, this drifting, is your exhale. The myths do not ask you to solve them. They do not ask you to carry every name forward. They only ask that you feel their movement beneath your own, that you recognize yourself not as separate from the ancient world but as its continuation. A brief, luminous shape in a story that has no final page. Somewhere, far beyond thought, chaos still waits, not as threat, as origin. From it, worlds arise. Into it, worlds return. And between those two silences, everything lives. You are here in the gentle middle, held aloud at rest. The universe does not rush you, it never has. The ancient world believed that everything meaningful began in darkness. Seeds split in soil. Stars ignited in black space. Life itself stirred in hidden places before ever seeing light. Night was not the enemy of creation. It was its cradle. In the same way, sleep is not the absence of living. It is where living renews itself. Every cell remembers this. Every breath follows it. The myths were shaped by this understanding. They never rushed toward endings. They lingered in beginnings. They trusted the unseen in Greek thought. Even the gods were born from shadow. Nyx, the night, was older than Olympus. She was feared even by Zeus, not because she was cruel, but because she represented what could not be commanded. Night arrives whether you invite it or not. Sleep comes whether you plan for it or not. The universe itself obeys this law. Stars collapse. Galaxies drift. Everything yields eventually to stillness. This is not loss. It is return. The stories you have drifted through are not meant to be remembered in detail. They are meant to become atmosphere, like a melody you cannot hum but still recognize, like a scent that carries you somewhere distant without effort. Myth works beneath language. It settles into intuition. It reshapes how the world feels. You may forget Zeus. You may forget Hera. You may forget Troy and heroes and wars. But you will not forget the feeling that the world is larger than fear. You will not forget the sense that every struggle has ancestors. You will not forget the quiet truth that even darkness carries meaning. These are the gifts of story. They do not sit on the surface of thought. They sink. They become part of how you move through life. Long ago, people believed that dreams were doors, that when sleep arrived, the soul wandered beyond the body, traveling through unseen realms. They did not think of sleep as nothingness. They thought of it as journey, a gentle one, a necessary one. And perhaps in some way they were right. Each night you leave behind the weight of your name, your history, your expectations. You become lighter, more fluid. You enter a space where images replace logic and time forgets itself. You do not disappear. You expand. The myths belong there. They belong to that borderland between waking and forgetting. They belong to the place where meaning becomes motion. They belong to the same realm as dreams. You do not need to carry them. They carry you. Every story you have heard tonight is already dissolving into something softer. It is becoming texture, mood, echo. It is settling into the same quiet layer of mind where lullabies live and childhood memories drift. That is where it is meant to go. The conscious mind can rest now. It has done enough. The day no longer requires explanation. Tomorrow does not require planning. The self does not require defense. All of that can wait. The night holds the world without effort. It holds cities and seas. It holds mountains and fields. It holds those who are awake and those who have already surrendered. It holds you. And in this holding there is no urgency. There is no test. There is no expectation. There is only rhythm. the slow, ancient rhythm that began before the first god learned its name: chaos, breath, form, rest. Again and again, you are part of this cycle not by choice but by nature. You belong to it as surely as stars belong to the sky. There is nowhere you need to go. There is nothing you need to become. The universe has already accepted you into its pattern. Let your thoughts thin. Let images blur. Let words lose their edges. The story no longer needs narration. It continues in silence. And in that silence you drift, gently, naturally, home. The quiet does not rush you, it never has. It waits with the patience of mountains and the tenderness of falling snow. In this space, effort loosens its grip. The mind no longer needs to measure or decide. It can simply float as clouds float, as leaves drift on slow water. Nothing is demanded here. Nothing is missing. Even the oldest gods would step aside in this place. Zeus, who ruled storms, could not command sleep. Athena, who mastered thought, could not outthink it. Apollo, who knew the future, could not delay it. Sleep arrives on its own terms, gentle and certain. It moves like twilight across a field, like a tide across sand, like a hand smoothing the surface of a restless lake. This is why stories for the night are different. They do not build toward a climax. They do not chase resolution. They move in circles. They repeat. They soften. They resemble the way the mind itself unwinds. Each word becomes less a meaning and more a texture. Each image becomes less a picture and more a feeling. You are not meant to hold them. You are meant to drift through them. The ancient storytellers understood this instinctively. They told tales beside fire not only to entertain, but to calm, to anchor, to remind those listening that they were part of something vast and enduring, that their fears were not solitary, that the world had weathered storms before and would weather them again. When the fire dimmed and voices faded, people lay beneath the open sky. Stars watched. Wind moved through grass. The earth breathed. And sleep arrived as naturally as night itself. That same rhythm lives here. You may no longer hear waves or wind. You may no longer see stars. But the body remembers. It remembers how to release. It remembers how to descend. The weight in your limbs is not heaviness. It is trust. Your breathing deepens not because you are tired, but because you are safe. The mind loosens not because it fails, but because it no longer needs to stand guard. The world does not collapse when you close your eyes. It continues quietly, just as it always has. Long before there were names, the universe learned this balance. Expansion and contraction. Movement and rest. Light and dark. Even galaxies breathe in this way. Even stars are born from collapse. So when you let go, you are not stepping away from life, you are aligning with it. The myths have carried you back to this understanding without asking you to think about it. They have not insisted. They have simply surrounded you with ancient rhythm, with rise and fall, with beginning and return, with gods who sleep and worlds that pause. Now the words themselves begin to fade, not abruptly, not completely. They blur at the edges like shapes seen through water. You do not need to follow them any longer. They have already done their work. The story is no longer outside you. It has become a sensation, a calm, a sense of being held by something older than worry. In this place, time is gentle. It stretches. It loosens. It forgets itself. There is no past pressing forward. There is no future pulling you. There is only the slow unfolding of rest. You are not late. You are exactly where you are meant to be. The universe does not hurry you. It never has. It waits. And in that waiting you drift, further, softer. Until even drifting becomes unnecessary. Until there is only rest. The world beyond your closed eyes continues its slow turning, but it no longer asks you to witness it. The sky can hold its stars without your attention. The earth can carry its mountains without your thought. Every system of existence has learned how to move without being watched, and in that truth, there is relief. You are not required to keep the world together. It has always known how to remain whole. Long before people told stories, long before they named gods, the universe practiced this quiet independence. Rivers carved valleys in silence. Forests grew without applause. Night followed day with no need for explanation. Existence did not wait for awareness. It simply unfolded. And yet, when awareness emerged, it brought wonder with it. Humans began to notice the sky. They began to ask why fire warmed. They began to fear storms and honor harvest. From these questions rose myth, not as a solution but as companionship. A way of saying, you are not alone in wondering. The gods were shaped not because the world needed rulers, but because the mind needed mirrors. Every myth is a conversation between uncertainty and hope. When people felt small, they imagined giants. When they feared death, they imagined guardians beyond it. When they faced chaos, they imagined order rising from shadow. In this way, mythology was not escape. It was grounding. It took the vastness of existence and gave it a voice that could be heard beside a fire. It took the terror of the unknown and gave it a name that could be spoken. It took the weight of living and distributed it across stories, so no one had to carry it alone. Now, in this quiet, those same stories return you to their source. Not to spectacle, not to drama, but to origin, to the place where all things begin without effort. Your body already knows this place. It visits it every night. The mind may resist at first, clinging to thought, replaying moments, rehearsing futures. But the deeper rhythm always wins. It draws attention inward. It softens edges. It blurs boundaries. The self loosens, not as loss, as expansion. In sleep, you are not diminished. You are widened. The tight borders of identity relax. You become closer to what you were before language shaped you, before roles defined you. Before expectations narrowed you, you become simply aware. Then gently, even awareness fades. This is not emptiness. It is potential returning to itself. The Greeks would have recognized this state. They would have called it sacred. A moment when the soul drifts beyond form, when even the gods grow quiet. They believed that in sleep, the human spirit brushed against realms unseen. That dreams were not illusions, but messages from deeper layers of existence. Whether or not that is true in a literal sense, it is true in feeling. Sleep feels like crossing a threshold, not into nothing, into somewhere softer, a place without sharp edges, a place without demand, a place where the world pauses its questions. The myths you have traveled through tonight were bridges to this place. They did not lead you forward. They led you inward, toward the same quiet that existed before the first story was told. That quiet has never left. It has been waiting beneath every thought. It is here now. You do not need to reach it. You are already within it. Breath by breath, the mind loosens. Sensation grows distant. Words become less defined. Meaning turns into atmosphere. The story dissolves into feeling. This is how every tale meant for sleep ends, not with a conclusion, with a return to the place where all stories begin. And in that place you rest. The return is gentle. It does not arrive with sound or signal. It comes like dusk, spreading so slowly that you cannot say when day became night. Thought does not vanish at once. It thins, it drifts, it loses urgency. Ideas no longer demand completion. They become shapes without edges, colors without names. The mind begins to move the way water moves, not in lines, not in goals, in slow, circular motion. This is the language of sleep. It is older than words, older than stories, older than fear. It is the rhythm that existed before the first question formed. You may notice a softness behind your eyes, a warmth in your chest, a heaviness in your limbs that is not discomfort but permission. Muscles release the memory of holding. Breath deepens without instruction. The body does what it has always known how to do. It returns. Every night you travel this path, not because you choose to, but because life is shaped this way. Even stars collapse into new beginnings. Even oceans retreat and return. Even mountains rise and erode. Rest is not interruption. It is continuation in another form. The ancient world knew this. They built their myths around cycles. Birth and decay, ascent and descent, light and dark. They did not imagine a universe moving in a straight line. They imagined a world breathing, inhale, exhale, creation. Return, you are inside that breath now. The story has already loosened its hold. The names of gods have softened. The images of heroes have blurred. What remains is not information. It is tone. It is atmosphere. It is the sense of being held by something vast and patient. This is what the myths were always guiding you toward, not belief, belonging. A feeling that the universe is not hostile, that existence is not accidental, that even in darkness there is order. You do not need to understand this. You only need to feel it. The night does not test you. It does not ask who you are or what you have done. It does not measure success or failure. It does not compare you to others. It simply receives you. In this receiving, the edges of self become less sharp. You are still you, but lighter, more spacious, less defined. The boundaries that separate inner from outer soften. The world feels farther away, yet strangely closer at the same time. This is the borderland, the place where waking hands off to dreaming. Here, logic loosens. Here, memory becomes mist. Here, time forgets itself. You are not falling. You are being carried by breath, by rhythm, by the same quiet force that once shaped Earth from chaos. There is nothing you need to follow now. No more paths. No more heroes. No more gods, only rest. The story has become silence, and the silence is kind. Sleep does not arrive as a door that closes. It arrives as a horizon that recedes. Each moment, the world feels slightly farther away, and each breath feels slightly deeper. You are not crossing into something unknown. You are returning to something familiar. The same place you have visited every night of your life, even when you cannot remember it. In this place, effort dissolves. The body no longer needs instruction. The mind no longer needs direction. The world no longer needs explanation. Everything that once felt urgent becomes distant, like sounds from another room. The concerns of the day lose their shape. They do not vanish in conflict. They simply soften, as if wrapped in cloth and placed gently aside. This is not forgetting. It is trusting that nothing is lost by resting. The ancient myths understood this kind of trust. They imagined sleep as a river that all beings must cross. Even gods drifted upon it. Even the most powerful bowed to its rhythm. Hypnos moved freely where no king could command. His touch was not force. It was inevitability woven with kindness. Sleep does not conquer you, it welcomes you, and you respond not with effort but with release. Each breath becomes slower. Each pause between breaths becomes longer. Each moment feels wider than the last. The body settles into its own weight. The surface beneath you becomes part of you. There is no need to adjust, no need to search for comfort. Comfort has already arrived in the form of stillness. The world continues beyond your awareness. Stars continue to burn. Winds continue to move. Cities continue to hum. But none of this requires your participation. You are allowed to be absent for a while. You are allowed to disappear gently, not as loss, as rest. The myths once spoke of journeys to the underworld, of heroes crossing rivers of shadow and returning changed. But every night offers a softer version of that passage. You cross a boundary that no map records. You enter a realm without landmarks. You do not carry weapons or names. You carry only breath. And even that begins to fade. Thought becomes slower than breath. Breath becomes slower than time. Time becomes less than feeling. You do not need to hold onto awareness. You do not need to witness yourself drifting. The drift happens on its own. This is how the universe carries everything, not by command, not by demand, by rhythm. Tides rise and fall without instruction. Seasons turn without effort. Night arrives without asking permission, so does sleep. It does not hurry you, it waits until you are ready. And readiness is not something you decide. It is something that happens. The edges of the world blur. The boundary between inner and outer thins. You are no longer quite in the room and not yet in a dream. You are between, held in a quiet that does not require definition. Here, nothing is wrong, nothing is missing, nothing is expected. The universe is content to hold you exactly as you are. You are safe, you are allowed, you are carried. And without noticing the moment it occurs, you let go. The letting go is so subtle that it feels like nothing at all. There is no boundary you must cross, no signal that announces arrival. One moment you are listening and the next, listening has softened into presence. Words lose their edges. Meaning becomes atmosphere. Thought no longer moves forward, it simply floats. The body continues without you, the heart keeps its rhythm. The lungs keep their tide. The skin keeps its quiet awareness of warmth and weight. You do not need to guide any of it. Life knows how to live. This is the oldest truth the universe holds. Before there were minds to worry, before there were voices to name, before there were gods to govern, existence unfolded on its own. Stars were born, matter cooled, worlds formed, all without effort, all without urgency. You are part of that same unfolding. Sleep is not something added to you. It is something revealed. It is the natural state beneath wakefulness. In this state, there is no narrative to follow. There is no sequence to remember. There is only sensation dissolving into stillness. The mind no longer asks where it is going. It simply rests where it is. This is not absence. It is fullness without form, like standing in fog where distance disappears, like floating in warm water where edges vanish, like being held without hands. Even memory loosens its grip. The day becomes a distant echo. Faces blur. Voices fade. Events lose their weight. What remains is not emptiness but a gentle neutrality. A place where nothing is demanded and nothing is refused. The myths which once guided you through gods and heroes now step aside. They have led you where they were always meant to lead you. Not to spectacle, not to revelation, to rest. This is the heart of every ancient lullaby, not instruction, not meaning, release. In this space, you do not need to be someone. You do not need to perform a role. You do not need to carry a story. You do not need to hold a future. You simply are. And even that begins to soften. Awareness becomes thinner than breath. Breath becomes slower than time. Time becomes irrelevant. The world does not disappear, it waits. It waits the way soil waits for seed. It waits the way night waits for dawn. It waits the way the universe waited before it became stars. There is no hurry, there has never been hurry. Everything arrives in its own season. Even you, so let the mind drift where it will. Let images come and go without attachment. Let silence deepen. You are not falling away from life, you are sinking into it, into its quiet foundation, into the place where all movement is born, and in that place nothing needs to be held, nothing needs to be known, nothing needs to be done. The night holds you, the world continues, and you rest. The world does not pause when you sleep, yet it grows gentler in your absence. Its edges soften, its urgency dissolves. What once felt sharp becomes distant as though wrapped in mist. You are no longer required to stand at the center of things. You are allowed to drift to the edge, where effort fades and being is enough. In this place, identity loosens. The name you carry becomes light. The story you tell about yourself grows quiet. The roles you hold release their grip. You are no longer worker or thinker or planner. You are no longer defined by past or promise. You are simply presence, thinning into calm. The ancient myths always led here. Beneath every hero's journey lay a return. Beneath every battle lay a stillness. Beneath every god lay silence. Even Olympus, in its imagined glory, was surrounded by sky. And beyond that sky was darkness, not hostile, not empty, simply vast. A reminder that even divinity rests within something greater. The Greeks did not fear this truth. They named it. They gave it shape. They called it chaos at the beginning of all things, not because it was violent, but because it was unformed. A field of possibility. A quiet before becoming. Each night you return to that beginning, not as loss, as renewal. Your mind releases structure the way water releases form. It flows back toward its origin. Thoughts become slower. Images blur. Logic yields to sensation. The edges between inner and outer soften. You may feel as though you are fading. You are not. You are widening in sleep. The self expands beyond its daily boundaries. It is no longer confined to schedules or worries. It drifts into a state older than memory. A state the body recognizes even when the mind resists. This is why rest feels like relief, not because you escape life, because you rejoin its deeper rhythm, the same rhythm that turns seasons, the same rhythm that moves tides, the same rhythm that shapes breath. Inhale, exhale, becoming, returning. You are not outside this cycle, you are it. The myths once gave this cycle faces and voices so it could be remembered. They told of gods who rose and fell, of worlds born from shadow, of journeys that ended in home. But beneath all their names and stories lay a single truth. Everything that exists moves between form and quiet. You are moving there now, not abruptly, not forcefully, gently, as a leaf drifts to water. As dusk becomes night, as a thought becomes a feeling, there is no edge to cross, only a softening. The world does not vanish, it simply recedes. The room remains. The night remains, but they grow less immediate as though viewed through a veil. Your attention no longer clings, it floats. You are safe in this drifting. The universe does not require vigilance. It has carried galaxies without assistance. It has balanced oceans and mountains without being watched. It can carry this moment as well. You are allowed to rest inside it. No achievement is required. No understanding is needed. No identity must be preserved. You are free to become light, and lighter still, until even the idea of drifting dissolves and only rest remains. There is a moment in every night when the world feels very far away. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a breath you did not notice taking. In that moment, the mind releases its final threads of tension. The body sinks a little deeper. The sense of I becomes softer, less defined, more like a presence than a person. This moment is older than memory. It existed before the first fire was lit, before the first name was spoken, before the first God was imagined. It is the moment when existence remembers that it does not need to strive. All of life moves toward this pause. Even the sun sets. Even the wind stills. Even the sea, in its endless motion, rests between waves. The myths reflected this truth in every cycle they told. Persephone descends before she rises. Demeter mourns before she blooms. Heroes wander before they return. Worlds fall before they are remade. Nothing moves forever in one direction. Every arc curves back toward stillness. You are following the same curve, not because you are tired, because you are part of the pattern. The body understands this without language. It releases muscles that have held posture all day. It slows the heart. It deepens the breath. It shifts from effort into maintenance, from vigilance into care. It moves you from the outer world to the inner one, and the inner world is vast. Here, time is different. Here, distance has no meaning. Here, images drift without order. This is where dreams are born, not as stories, as sensations, as fragments, as movement without destination. The ancient people believed that this realm was sacred. They believed that in sleep, the soul wandered through invisible landscapes, that it touched truths too subtle for daylight. Whether or not that is literally true, it remains emotionally true. Sleep opens a space where logic steps aside and intuition breathes. In this space, you do not need to hold yourself together. You can become fluid. Your thoughts may fragment. Your awareness may dim. Your sense of self may thin. This is not disappearance. It is return. Return to a state that existed before definition, before effort, before narrative. A state where being is enough. The world does not abandon you here. It holds you differently, like water holds a leaf, like sky holds a cloud, like night holds the earth. There is no fall, only floating. The last edges of wakefulness soften. The part of you that listens begins to drift. Words become sounds. Sounds become texture. Texture becomes nothing in particular. And in that gentle unraveling, something ancient recognizes itself. This is the place where myths were born, not in brilliance. In quiet, in the space between one breath and the next, in the hush before dawn, in the dark where imagination stirs without command. You do not need to go anywhere. You are already arriving. The universe has been carrying you since before you learned how to think. It will continue to carry you now. All you have to do is nothing. Nothing is required of you now. The day has released you. The story has released you. Even the idea of listening begins to loosen. What remains is a gentle awareness, floating in a wide and patient dark. This dark is not empty. It is full in a way that cannot be named, full of rest, full of quiet, full of the same depth that existed before the first star learned how to shine. Long ago, the ancients imagined that all things began in such a place. They called it chaos, not because it was violent, but because it had no edges. It was a sea without shore, a sky without horizon. From it, earth rose. From it, night spread. From it, love stirred. Everything that would ever exist emerged from that quiet openness. Each night you return there, not as a memory, not as a belief, as a sensation. It feels like floating. It feels like sinking. It feels like nothing at all. The mind no longer forms questions. The body no longer adjusts. Awareness thins until it becomes more like atmosphere than thought. You are not inside a room. You are not inside a story. You are inside a rhythm older than rooms and stories. The world has become distant, not gone, just gentle. Somewhere, stars continue their slow paths. Somewhere, oceans breathe against the shore. Somewhere, cities hum and fade. But none of this requires you. You are allowed to be absent. The Greeks believed that even the gods stepped back at times. That even Zeus rested his thunder. That even Apollo set down his light. If divinity itself could pause, then surely you may. You do not need to hold the future. You do not need to remember the past. You do not need to be anyone in particular. You are allowed to dissolve into the night. The boundaries that define you during the day, your name, your role, your history, grow transparent. They do not vanish. They simply wait. Tomorrow they will return. But for now they release you. You become lighter than thought. You become quieter than memory. You become part of the dark that is not dark at all, but soft, wide, and endlessly patient. This is the same darkness that held Gaia before Earth had shape. The same darkness that cradled Nyx before night had a name. The same darkness that welcomed every hero after their final breath. It is not an ending. It is a home, and you are already there. Breath slows, awareness drifts. The last edges of wakefulness blur. There is no need to follow anything further. The story has carried you as far as words can go. Beyond this point, only rest remains, and rest is enough. There is nothing left to reach for. Even the idea of reaching fades. The mind no longer searches for meaning, because meaning has dissolved into atmosphere. The body no longer holds itself upright, because gravity has become gentle. You are not moving toward sleep. You are already within it. What remains is only the soft echo of awareness, like the last ripple on still water. In this place, there is no beginning and no end. There is only presence. The ancient world imagined this as the breath of the universe itself. a vast, quiet inhalation that holds everything without effort. Before gods had names, before earth had form, before light knew how to shine, there was this same stillness, and it was enough. You are not separate from it, you never were. Every thought you have ever had rose from this quiet. Every dream you have ever dreamed returned to it. Every moment of rest has been a reunion. Sleep is not departure, it is remembrance. A remembering of what it feels like to exist without weight, without identity, without urgency. Here, you do not need to be coherent, you do not need to be aware, you do not need to be anything at all. The universe does not require definition in order to hold you. It holds stars without naming them. It holds oceans without measuring them. It holds centuries without counting them. It holds you in the same way, softly, silently, completely. The last threads of thought loosen. They do not snap. They drift. Images fade before they can form. Words lose their shape. Even the sense of listening becomes distant, like a memory of a sound heard long ago. You are not falling, you are settling, like dust in still air, like snow in twilight, like a leaf on quiet water. Everything that once felt separate now feels part of the same wide calm. Inner and outer soften into one. The boundary between you and the night becomes transparent. There is no edge here, only depth. And in that depth, nothing is wrong. Nothing is missing. Nothing is required. The world continues its turning without effort. The stars continue their slow paths without witness. The future waits without urgency. You are free from needing to carry any of it. The ancient stories have done their work. The gods have stepped aside. The heroes have gone quiet. What remains is the same thing that has always remained. Rest. Pure. Undisturbed, endless, and before the night carries you completely, there is one last gentle whisper for those who are still listening. If this story has brought you calm, if these ancient rhythms have made the world feel softer, there are 2 more long journeys waiting for you here on Somni Kron. They are shaped in the same quiet way. They move with the same patience. They are made for long nights and drifting minds. You do not need to search for them now. You do not need to decide. Simply know they are here when another evening arrives, when the world feels heavy again. When you need a place to rest that asks nothing from you, they will be waiting. And now, there is nothing more you need to do. Let the screen fade. Let the sound become distant. Let the night complete what these words began. The story does not end. It becomes sleep. Good night.